Hello and welcome to Devil's Digest TV and our 2026 Fall Camp Preview. I'm Adam Beadle here with publisher Hode Rubino. Last time we discussed the Sun Devils' offense heading into their preseason preparations, and now it's all about ASU's defense and special teams and what we can expect to see for them in these upcoming August practices. There aren't many starters at all on the defensive side of the ball, but one of them resides on the defensive line, and it is a true veteran of Arizona State and on the Pat Tillman Leadership Council, and that is CJ Fight. Now, the question is, can the talent around CJ Fight complement each other?
Yeah, every time you see one side of the ball excel in spring practice, it really is the classic good news, bad news scenario. And we talked about Marquise Gillis. We talked about so many ASU running backs really having their moments in spring, and that's great to see. That's great for the coaches to have that quote unquote good headache when they play a running back. But the other side of the coin is obviously the run defense for ASU and CJ Fighter you mentioned, as we know, was very limited during spring practice. So you definitely take with a grain of salt what you saw from the interior of the front four. But, nonetheless, I think coaches are probably kind of anxious to see this interior, this run defense for the Sun Devils really play and play well. And again, they're going to have their hands full with very good running backs. So obviously, the big question is who's going to be the starter next to CJ Fight. Zach Swanson, who has really had a string of bad luck with injuries and was also held out of spring practice because of injury, could be the starter alongside him. Mikael Gardner, also somebody who has a lot of bad luck with injuries towards Achilles on his other foot when summer workouts took place, and he actually was able to practice very late in the spring and definitely showed a lot of promise and really instilled, some confidence that this interior of the front four could be well. But ASU is not going to have his services. Blazin Lano Wong, who I think ASU fans know more for about his trick plays on fake punts rather than run defense, is somebody who I think could end up being a really big part of this run defense for ASU. He's just like grizzled veteran that coaches always speak highly of, and you wonder if he could find his way to being the starter. Next to CJ Fight, Jeffrey Manns is a junior college transfer, and he's somebody that did have a pretty solid spring. By default, got a lot of reps when guys like Gardner, Swanson, and CJ Fight were not fully healthy in the spring. So now to see him as a rotation player, probably in fall camp, is something that we're definitely going to follow, quite closely. But yeah, that run defense for ASU is one aspect of this defense, and even in some of the later years, was definitely a strength on this side of the ball, and definitely has to continue to be in 2026. When you look at defensive ends, ASU has had not only two starters to replace, but also most of it's too deep. Now they got Clayton Smith back for an extra year of eligibility, so that's definitely a big addition. That's not from the portal, the recruiting class. And even though he
At defensive end and
was
not wide receiver.
defensive end, yeah, yeah, you stole my thunder there, Adam, but yeah, defensive end. Although I mean, him at wide receiver with his 6'5" frame with Reed Harris, fade routes, goal line situations. It's going to get
We'll
interesting.
see.
It's going to get interesting. But I thought ASU did a phenomenal job in the transfer portal, landing Imari Winston and Jalen Thompson. Imari Winston from Baylor, Jalen Thompson from Michigan State. And if you recall, Adam, those additions happened really late in the transfer portal. ASU fans were freaking out. They said, like, okay, you addressed every position but defensive end, and we really need that pass rush to be even better than it was in 2025. And we definitely, saw a lot of flashes from those two players in specific. Again, you talk about the good news, bad news. That did also lend itself to not so great play by the offensive tackles for ASU. At times, it wasn't consistent all throughout spring, but I feel that those two transfer portal additions, Clayton Smith, that's a good rotation, and one guy who I think is going to be part of that rotation, and that should not be a surprise to anyone at all at this point, is true freshman Julian Hugo. He is somebody that even before spring practice started, I gave my subscribers a list of, okay, look out for these true freshmen in spring practice. They might turn some heads. And he was one guy. Jake Fetty was one guy. Daquan Dunn is another guy. I know we would talk about him when we get to the secondary. But he's somebody that I think is going to be in the two deep. And sure, he does have a lot of competition from guys like Albert Smith and guys like Roman Petrie, all players that did have some good moments in spring practice. But that's basically how I see the two deep, more or less, at the defensive line. There's a lot of bodies to choose from. So I think just like the offensive line, just like the running back group, you have to see who's going to separate themselves and when. But I think midway through fall camp, we might have a pretty good idea, just like other positions, what this defensive line rotation is going to look like.
Dillingham did say earlier this week there's a good chance that there might be an opportunity for some freshmen to see the field this year. And I think
All
you and I can both agree that the most likely of that potentially would be Julian Hugo. So that'll be something to look out for as we move on to the next group on the defensive side of the ball. That's the linebacker group. ASU has done very well in that department in the last couple of years. AJ Cooper leading his pack of werewolves, I guess you could say. And they went in the portal and they landed one heck of a guy in Owen Long who just paced all FBS schools last year with 151 tackles. And Martell Hughes is another guy who, has been able to tell a story of coming in as a freshman and really seeking opportunities early and has earned his way into some reps and some snaps for ASU. Can this group once again be effective, a very effective piece of ASU's defense?
Yeah, there's really no doubt in my mind that the drop off is going to be minimal, if any, from last year. You have to give ASU a lot of credit. I mean, it's one thing to evaluate talent at the high level that they do, but to land a guy like Owen Long, like you said, leader in tackles at FBS, transfer from Colorado State, when everybody knows out there, ASU doesn't offer the highest NIL paychecks for given players. And that's not only that you're able to land two top 10 wide receiver transfers, as I mentioned earlier, but also land a guy like Owen Long. That should be a seamless transition from Keyshawn Elliott. And this is not knocking down Keyshawn Elliott by any means. Definitely one of the best linebackers we've seen in Tempe this century. But Owen Long is just as good, and some will say even more instinctual than Keyshawn Elliott was during his 2 years in Tempe. So to have Martell Hughes, who hasn't played a lot just because of a lot of depth in front of him his first 2 years at ASU, but every time he was given an opportunity, he really took it with both hands and shined. And now to see him as a starter, seeing go through spring practice as a starter, there's really no reason to think that he's not going to develop even more. And again, he's shown us quite a bit in the last 2 years. Cyrus Fiaseo, much like Clayton Smith, getting that extra year of eligibility, being that first player off the bench, a seasoned veteran, and I think you would agree, Adam, that he displayed at a different level this spring practice. Maybe fatherhood really affected him in a good way. Who knows? But I was really impressed by what I saw from him. And again, this is not a player that was a slouch by any means his first couple of years at ASU, but we've seen him really kick it to a different level. And I'm really excited to see what he can do for this linebacker group. Then you got some players, little longer in the tooth, but not by a lot. A prayer young black goat, best name in college football. He can't convince you otherwise. Ramiri Davis, a rare transfer from NAU, I think did have some good moments in the spring. Asaya Safea, a young player who obviously been caught with a lot of good players ahead of him and not being able to play all that much since arriving in Tempe. But I also thought in the spring he's somebody that showed can make a pretty strong charge on the two deep. So I think linebackers are going to be fine. There's no doubt that you're losing absolute two studs in Keyshawn Elliott and Jordan Crook. Going back to our quote unquote legal news in the beginning of this podcast, maybe Jordan Crook comes back. Who knows? But all jokes aside, I think linebackers are going to be in good hands. AJ Cooper, ever since he arrived in Tempe, does a great job with that group. And again, he has a lot of good talent, a nice mix of veterans and young players to work with, and making sure that this heart and soul of this ASU defense is going to be pumping quite well in 2026.
It's crazy to say that the whole idea of Jordan Crook potentially returning to ASU is a legitimate and could potentially be a serious conversation. I was also super surprised when Prairie Young Blackgoat's name started flying afloat in all social media.
Uh-oh.
I've been covering that kid since high school, so it was funny to see people all of a sudden discover who he was, knowing he's been at ASU for the last couple of years. And I saw him play at Coconino High School. We talk about another group as we keep talking about this ASU defense. Talking about the corner group, ASU seems to be in pretty solid position with two starters, Rodney Bimage and Ashton Stamps, who I think you and I can both agree will likely probably be the guys who will line up when ASU hits the field week 1 against Morgan State. So the bigger question now for ASU is, can this depth sort of prevent a drop off when called into action? If there's a moment when maybe Rodney Bimage goes down or Ashton Stamps, needs to take a couple snaps off, is this depth going to be able to come in and have the same sort of production that the two starters we think are going to be there are going to have?
Yeah, to me, Adam, that's the most legitimate question mark slash concern on the team. This is not a knock on guys like Joseph Smith, like Caleb Chester, like Nigel Pringle. I think they definitely did have their moments in the spring, obviously having their hands full with a very, very talented wide receiver group every day in practice. But I think we really need to see those specific players step up and step up in a big way. Nasir Stevens is somebody who was just announced earlier today as an addition coming from Cerritos College. Also spent 1 year at Utah the year before. So I think that maybe it's one area that not a lot of people are talking about, that depth at cornerback. But I think ASU is definitely going to have to prove that this goes from a being a question mark to being one aspect where you can look in the mirror and say, okay, I do feel comfortable with the rotation. I do feel comfortable with the overall talent level. But Randy Bennett and Ashton Stamps, just a great duo of starting cornerbacks. I mean, sure, they got some big shoes to fill, replacing Keith Abney, who is now in the NFL with the Detroit Lions, Javon Robinson, who left with the transfer portal to Wisconsin. But I just feel that the drop off again, I don't think is going to be that big, if at all. And again, they definitely have a lot to live up to. But I like what I saw from that duo of starters in spring. And again, it's not as if the wide receivers group did not give them a lot to chew on each and every day in practice. I think that some games might actually be maybe easy for those cornerbacks when you have the likes of Reed Harris or Martin Miller and Raiden Van Wright defending each day in Kajikawa Field.
Staying in the secondary, kind of talking about this safety group and the nickel role as well. Some more solid transfer players ASU added this offseason, which included Lyric Rawls, Josiah McGrew, and then you add a couple of veterans and a guy like Montana Warren, who, in my opinion, has probably the most contagious energy on the entire team. And when you saw him at Media Day, he was just so excited and pumped up to be there. And then another guy as well that was really, really solid for ASU last season, that was Boogie Wilson. There seems to be a lot of building excitement for this group heading into 2026.
Yeah, and for very good reason. I'll start with one player that maybe isn't, I know you mentioned him, but I don't think it's been talked about that much, is Josiah McGrew, the transfer from FIU. Adam, look, this is an absolute steal. I mean, he put up great numbers as a freshman in FIU, bet on himself, knew that he was destined to play at the Power 4 level. Again, you scratch your head in a good way. How is ASU, out of all the teams out there, able to have a guy transfer 3 time zones to come over here to Tempe? And my gosh, what a spring practice he had! And he is, maybe quote unquote upsetting the balance of this safety group, because I think Josiah McGrew would be a great free safety. Lyric Wells can play both free and strong safety. But then the question is, okay, Montana Warren, who was maybe pegged to be the strong safety, is he now going to battle for reps at nickel? And he's going to probably battle Boogie Wilson, who did have a shoulder injury, did have to miss spring. I think in the spring last year too, if I'm not mistaken. But when healthy, I mean, we saw, I mean, what a great addition he was to the team with Xavier Alford missing, all but 2 games, I believe, last year. Boogie Wilson stepped in a huge way, and I think having him at nickel is really going to be something that's going to help ASU quite a bit, or maybe Montana Warren goes back to his roots, so to speak, and he's going to play nickel for the Sun Devils. Either way, there's really just a lot of talent in the safety room. Mo Williams, is the guy probably lining up more at strong safety. I think is really gonna play well for ASU if he is called upon. A really young player in Ben Alafeo Lilly, who maybe more of a nickel than a free, is somebody also to really keep your eye on. But yeah, again, we talk about some position coaches having bigger good headaches than our position coaches. I think that David Gibbs, the safeties coach for ASU, definitely has some things to figure out. And again, I just quote unquote blame a guy like Josiah McGrew, who's really causing some of the shuffling over there because he's going to be a guy, Adam, that I think is going to be really, really hard to keep off the field. And it's really just more of a question, okay, is he going to be a starter at free safety or he's going to be the first man off the bench? And when he comes off the bench, is he playing, closer to 30, 40 snaps and higher than your typical reserve? But definitely a lot of good talent at safety. And I think unlike cornerback, there's a lot of good depth there too.
Well, last but not least, let's talk about the position group I think has probably been the most nerve-wracking for Arizona State fans during the Kenny Dillingham era, and that is special teams. And to suffice it, these newcomers have hit the ground running to, calm, I think, a lot of ASU fans' nerves. They were very consistent for the most part in spring practice, but there's still a lot of, questions about, how really are they going to play out into the next season.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with kicker. And look, Carson Smith definitely has some big shoes to fill. Jesus Gomez, who I think last year came as advertised, did win a game or two for ASU, was very, very reliable, by and large, and really was able to put some of those special team fears, as you mentioned, by the fans to rest when it came to kicking game. Also did a good job with kickoff. So Carson Smith does have a huge burden of proof on him. Even in kickoffs, I think some were apprehensive, and I can't say it's totally unfounded of how great of a kickoff guy Carson Smith can be. And in terms of his range, where Jesus Gomez is somebody who you felt really comfortable going out there when the field goal is 50 yards or longer.
Mhm.
I don't know if Carson Smith quite fits that category. So I'm curious to see if this is a situation where not having a big leg kicker does cause Kenny Dillingham to take more chances on fourth down. We saw that a lot in 2024 with mixed results, obviously. But I think Carson Smith is basically going to be the decider of how adventurous this offense is going to be on fourth down or not. When it comes to punter, I think that's a huge position battle, which maybe goes under the radar. Cannon Floyd, the local guy from Horizon High School, has been very, very up and down during his career at ASU. And obviously, there's a caveat of not being 100% healthy, especially last year. So I'm just curious to see if the health problems are fully behind him, if he can display that consistency, if he can finally take the ASU punting game out of the basement of the Big 12, which has been seemingly for the last 2 years, and really have that, be a strength. I think you really just owe it to such a great defense to really put them in good field position because that definitely has not been the case, even in 2024 when ASU did win the Big 12 championship. But he does have a huge, pun intended, battle in 6'7" Ohio State transfer Nick McCarty, who that booming leg that we saw in the viral videos, did show up more times than not in spring practice. But consistency kind of eluded him, also kind of eluded Cannon Floyd, to be honest. So that's one battle that really could really continue maybe until the last week of August at this point. Who knows? But I think that the result of that battle is going to be a better punter for ASU overall because if Cannon Ford can beat Nick McCarty, I think that's really going to signal a true advancement in Floyd's game. Just going back to kicker real quick, I think Carson Kiefer is somebody who I would not dismiss in the battle for field goal kicking duties. He's somebody that does shine when given an opportunity. I don't think he'll supplant Carson Smith as a starter, but it'll be interesting to see how much of a competition he can give Smith. Then you have two long snappers, Grayson Curtis from the Mexico State transfer, Tyler Wigglesworth, a returning player. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. I really didn't see any snapping issues when it came to punts or being a field goal. So, as the joke goes with special teams, the less you talk about them, the better off they are. But I just feel that Carson Smith is going to evoke some kind of conversation. When you're going to be out there attempting a field goal of 45 yards or longer, let alone 50 yards or longer. Can he be as consistent as Jesus Gomez was from that spot? And again, punter, whether it's McLarty, whether it's Floyd, are they just going to put that special teams aspect to rest? Because I think the ASU fans have definitely paid their dues, complaining and belly aching over the punting game for the Sun Devils.
Well, we are just days away from seeing how all of these position battles in the offense, defensive side, and even special teams are going to play out as ASU fall camp is quickly approaching. And for all of your latest fall camp updates, make sure you check out our practice reports at DevilsDigest.com and give us a follow on Twitter at Devils Digest. Thank you to our supporters, Santan Ford and Burrito Express. For publisher Hoder Rubino, I'm Adam Beadle, and we will talk to you soon from fall camp.